So, I guess to set the scene, I think there's two things going to affect us as a profession. The datification of the world, which is basically the fact that there's going to be more data out there than ever before, and this is the world we're living in, and urbanisation. That's the reality of where we're at. We've got more people going to live in cities, and they're going to be cities like we've never had before. And if those are not core planning issues, then they need to be core planning issues, because this is the future of what we're going to deal with. 64% and 86% of the urbanised and developing and developed worlds are all going to live in cities in the near future, and these are going to be crazy cities. So I think, from a planning perspective, the future of our cities is going to be how we as planners learn how to adopt and utilise and data mine, as they call it, this data to make smart cities. Because smart cities are certainly going to be part of it, but we need to have great cities at the same time. So in terms of my presentation today, I cover big data, they call the Internet of Things, and then some examples on how the planning profession can and already are, with some of the work that we've been doing, utilise some of this stuff. So in particular, mobile phone data, something called path intelligence, and a few other little things to share along the way. So for those who may not have heard the concept of big data before, for all of its language, all it is essentially saying is we now have the computing power to make sense of all of the garbage that we've got out there. There's an enormous amount of data that's out there. We now finally have the computing power and the models to make sense of it all, and that's what big data is, the ability to harness this and make sense of it. Because some interesting stuff, I did cover this one earlier, but for those who didn't see it, between dawn, when we started the world, 2003, 5 exabytes of data is what we generated. We now generate that every 2 days. Moore's law that you heard about this morning is applying at the same rate the data that we're talking about. In the time I've been presenting this slide so far, you can see how many tweets and social media updates and email sends and gigabytes of data, how many new users there are on the internet. I was finding it pretty crazy that there's 220 people, while I've been talking now, have just suddenly found the internet. But that's the reality of the world that we're talking about as we move through. And if you look at this, this is billions of devices connected on the upward line. So what we're talking about from, the internet started in 1992 when it was first invented. So now what we're talking 50 billion, Keith Suter this morning said 70 billion, but what's tens of billions between friends? There's only going to be 8 billion of us on the planet, but we're going to be talking about 50 billion devices connected to it. And I guarantee most of you kind of go, that's crazy, but hands up who's got an iPhone, an iPad, and a laptop here with them right now in the room. There we go. We probably have a couple of hundred sensors in this room alone. We all have them. So this is the world that we're living in. The guys would say that the last fundamental city building things was the automobile or lifts, depending on which way you want to look at it. Automobiles meant we could have bigger cities, lifts meant we could have taller cities, but the next big shift in the way the cities are going to work is going to come down to smart cities and big data and how we make sense of that, because our personal computers that we all have are sharing information, and we can use that as a profession, from the types of music I like to listen to, where I've been, for those of you wearing Fitbits on your arm that are telling people yourself how much exercise I've done today, but they also can tell you where you've been today if you're wearing a GPS. But there's so much stuff out there which is really interesting if we can figure out how to use it as a profession, and if we can be brave enough to tackle it, because this datification of our cities, as they're called, as a profession, I think we've been trained and we accept to work in a data-poor environment. I would argue that we rely on census data historically to make assumptions, and it's actually a pretty crappy piece of data set. It's probably already 2 years old by the time we get it. It's only held every 4 years. And it's really, it's an incredible data set, but really, if you think about the pace of things that happen, imagine what's happened in the last 4 years. Does that data set really reflect what's happening in our cities? Because I would argue that so much has happened in the last 4 years and will keep happening and happening and happening, that census data alone is not going to be enough for our profession to do what we do. And we need to learn and be willing to accept that we need to access and mine some of this data. Because if you think about what it means for our cities, you've got cities like Tokyo with 35 million people. It can only function the way it functions because it's a smart city that's utilising systems and information to make us move around and live in an organised and structured way. Otherwise, we will descend into chaos. And if we get into more and more urbanisation, which is inevitable, we cannot keep doing things the way we've always done and to scare people a little bit, because I think this is, and Keith spoke a little bit about this morning, I'm putting a different word to it. They call it your digital tattoo. We all have a digital tattoo, whether you like it or not, and they call it that. Di's got one. We found out this morning.
We are not discussing that ever again.
But the internet knows exactly where we've been, knows our websites, it knows what we do. You'll notice this, like, we're obviously here in Townsville. I booked a hotel room. For the last week, every time I open Google, all I get is car hire in Townsville, hotel rooms in Townsville, book a flight to Townsville. Like, it's tracking my digital footprint. I'm leaving a trail behind of breadcrumbs, which is scary, but if you flip it onto the positive side, incredibly powerful if we can use it to shape cities the way we want to. Because our data, we're leaving an enormous amount of data behind. And you can't get rid of it as well, which is kind of the scary bit. So do be careful about what you go and do on the internet, as Keith was saying this morning. But it's to the point where, you know, every photo we take on our phone is geo-referenced, but again, we can use that to see what's going on in the world. And I think there's a lot of technology out there, but really other professions are doing this better than us. And I would say this is such a simple thing called Google Analytics. Now, we all use Google. It's now a term vernacular to actually search the internet. It was a brand, but now it means it is the thing. It's a verb now. But you can buy their data. Anyone can do it. A council can do it. You can search for your terms, and you can ask for things. So I did it out of interest. I bought last week the top 10 searches within Australia on Google using the term planning, just to see what it showed up. And do you know what it was? Every single one of them was a city council. Not one of them was aspirational, not one of them was a question. City of Melbourne was the number one, Brisbane City was number two, then Hobart was number three in terms of the most searched terms using the word planning. Now that was a very narrow search, but you could expand them to be as much as you want. You could do it in your local government area. You could actually ask people before they know about it what their questions are, because you're data mining Google. You can actually know what your community is typing into Google and wanting to know about their cities, and you can give them the answers before they've even thought to ask that question publicly, because you can track their digital footprints. And I think as a profession, this is really interesting and exciting stuff if we can be brave enough to enter the big data world. Or to put it another way, what if we actually went to the community in a proactive way and asked them to help solve our problems? Now, these things out there at the moment, they're called hackathons. Now, it started a few years ago, or it started a long time ago when people were trying to break into the FBI and steal company secrets and people's identities. And there's the negative side. The positive side now is people in the world is harnessing that energy and actually trying to solve problems. So most recently, it was a biomedical research project. There was a big problem. It was put out on the net in a crowdsourcing attempt, and they basically put it out to all of the IT nerds on the web, and they got about 5,000 people contributing from all around the world to solve a biomedical problem and a research issue. And they came up with solutions in a 2-week period that they hadn't been able to crack in about 3 years in a single research facility, because you're tapping brains from around the world in hackathons. So why can't we do that as planners? Why can't we put out some of our very big vexing questions around cities and let the communities help? And it may not be the residents living next door. It could be a resident living in Amsterdam or around the world telling us a secret that they've learned from their city the hard way. And I think community engagement through the internet has much better opportunity than just being about the people living next door who are directly affected, because we have an enormous amount of learning that we can tap into. And I'm not trying to be critical of our profession. I don't think it's necessarily all of our fault, because until recently we haven't had a lot of these tools. This is moving at an enormous rate. I don't know if people remember, iPhones were only invented 9 years ago. I don't know if anyone can remember a time pre-iPhone, but it's happening pretty quickly. And I don't, we rely, some would say our profession is an art form or a sort of social end of it. Others would say it's a science and it's political, the data end of it. But we do rely a lot on gut feels. Does this feel like a right place? But I would say now we have a lot better opportunities to use quantifiable data rather than just qualitative data. Because this big data and planning is our opportunity to data mine for land use patterns and social patterns and things that will make big differences in our cities. So to give some examples of some interesting things that we've been trying to use this stuff in our projects, because it's not just about talking to ideas. I'm always of the belief you've got to be able to do it, not just talk about it. So for all of the people in the room, mobile phones and credit cards are no longer necessarily your friends or secret. It's part of the deals when you sign up for them that they can sell their data. Everyone is selling their data. So mobile phone companies effectively monitor you all of the time. You have a GPS and they are now a beacon that they track you everywhere you go. I know there's confidentiality things that they don't know that that's Chris's phone, but nonetheless they do know that it's phone 25734-E. They know exactly where my phone goes, and if they wanted to, they know what it belongs to me. If I can just park all of the negative Big Brother stuff for a second, because I think that's very real and an issue, but if I look at the positive opportunities for it from a planning perspective, there's really cool stuff happening in retail space. So shopping centres figured out that if they know where shoppers go, they can make more money. It's my underlying message of this entire presentation is that there's other industries and professions out there doing it far better than us. We don't need to reinvent the wheel, we just need to actually start using the wheel. So shopping centres have been applying this technology for a while. So what those little red dots and black lines are showing, a little bit blurry, I apologise, is where people are moving through their shopping centre. They just have simple antenna that they track people. They can tell when people are up. They can merge this with credit card data. They can tell when sales are up. You can produce heat mapping so you know where people, how long they're staying. Are they lingering? Are they bypassing a shop? Are they going to a particular shop? Brisbane City Council have adopted this in the Queen Street Mall. Not many people know about it. They're not sharing their data. It's a great example. Maybe Andrew can get up to that. It's Brisbane Marketing, not Brisbane City Council, but nonetheless, Brisbane City Council, inverted commas, have an incredible data set that they track everyone who goes into the Queen Street Mall and have been doing so since January, and they know exactly where you go, how long you take. Do you stop at a shop? Do you go straight through? Do you go here and go right? Do you go here and go left? Because there's enough sensors there they can get it down to that fine grain. They're doing it purely from a tourism and investment perspective. I'm going, God, what an incredible data tool and set that we can do so much to understand how our people work and walk in our cities. And it's a good example of why open data is so important. As Brisbane City Council costing a lot of money, but they're sitting on it and don't have any intentions to do anything with it. But I would sort of say if planners could get a hold and actually use some of this data, maybe all of a sudden the census doesn't become so important, because if you assume that most of us have got mobile phones, there are more mobile phones on the planet than people, so generally we all have at least one, if not two of them. I think we could actually use mobile phones to do real-time census stuff. You can actually track stuff all this time. Again, park Big Brother, but if you can use mobile phones to track people, then why wouldn't you? But more importantly, you can use them to figure out where people are walking, where they're driving, and then where we should put a connection. Why should we guess that at design phase when I can actually see it? Anyone who's seen those lovely photographs of the concrete path, then the worn piece of grass in the middle, the desire line they call it? Well, this is real-time desire line mapping, because you can use mobile phones to figure out exactly where people go, not where you think you're going to go. If you know that, I would hope that we would all plan things a little bit differently. But more importantly, we can look at where people congregate, make sure we've got park benches and water bubbles based on where they actually go, not where we think they're going to go. I think they can, as I said, be used as an interim census measurement tool. By no means saying not to use the census, but I think these can fill the gaps in the middle. And you can use patronage of these, and this is something that we're exploring on a live project at the moment. But councils say that they can't maintain the parks that we've got and as it is now. But if you had 100 parks in your city and you use mobile phone data to figure out which ones were used and which ones weren't, at what times of the day, I bet you can make some better informed decisions about what facilities you might choose to get rid of based on real patronage. Not, well, I was there at 6 o'clock this morning, there was no one there. Well, there might have been a lot of people there at 7 o'clock. Or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, but mobile phones will always tell that, because we generally take our phones with us everywhere we go, even when we go to the park. So I think this stuff is incredibly powerful for local government infrastructure and spending decisions, and potential difficult decisions of whether you can afford to maintain all of your existing facilities and community places. You can potentially repurpose that stuff. Good. And then taking it in a slightly similar but different direction now. Same technology, just tracking cars. We have our phones in our cars, green boxes next to traffic lights, and a lot of them will have a little black antenna sticking up now. That tracks you as you go past. It knows between signal box A and signal box B that it should take you 3 minutes in a normal road. If it takes longer than that, it therefore assumes that the road is congested, and it automatically opens up more green time on the lights. Once upon a time, there was a guy watching a video camera going, that road looks clogged, I'll adjust the green times, a computer does it now. And the system works and flows because it's using us and tracking us. But I think this is a major opportunity for traffic engineers and planners on the fringe of that to start actually understanding where people are going again on roads and make certain decisions on it. Because some of this stuff can potentially freak people out. So the Big Brother stuff is real, and I'm by no means advocating understand all the privatisation of data. We need to understand that. But there's so much great city building opportunities if we can overcome some of those hurdles. And hopefully this presentation will spark your interest as a planner on how we can do things a little bit differently. Before I truly scare all the women in the room here around banking and loyalty data. Because I actually think this is one which is right out there on the scary end of it, but I actually think this is probably our single biggest thing. I've been talking about on this topic for a few years, is that as a profession, I think we fail all of the time because we can't and don't measure quantifiably the benefit that our profession has to the industry. We tend to do stuff and go, oh, we feel great about it, or I saw a few more people walking down the street, good job, but we don't measure it. We just typically don't measure in a quantifiable sense the benefit of planning. And I think this stuff is certainly going to allow us to do that. In the same sense, credit card data is being used, you can buy it. I can see where people are spending it, where they're spending money. But what a great example. If we've got the priority development area where we're sitting here today in the port, we can buy credit card data to understand, maybe we'll exclude the casino bit out of it because that would probably distort it a little bit, but we can buy credit card data today for the port, the PIA area, and then we could do it in a year, in 2 years, in 3 years' time, and we can actually see true expenditure figures creeping up based on the impact of the development that's creeping into the area. We can do it after a renovation of a major main street. You know, Mackay's just done their main street. Imagine how powerful it would be if Mackay measured how many dollars are being spent through the Mackay Main Street economy before and after they did their upgrades. And if it actually showed that it picked up, how much easier would it be to go back to council and ask for another $5 million to do the next street and the next street? Because the credit card companies are selling this data, retailers and governments are buying it. Actually, I'm going to go back because I really like this quote over here, because this is where it kind of gets to. Insurance stuff. So, because the banks own insurance own shopping centres and retail groups. So, Woolworths and the National Australia Bank have merged their data sets now. So, they know as a result, however they've figured out through, just through pure modelling and analytics, the people who drink lots of milk and eat lots of red meat are very good car insurance risks, as opposed to those people who buy lots of pasta and rice and fill up their petrol at night time and drink spirits are poor insurance risks. So what they're doing is taking your everyday reward card data, because you swipe it, it knows therefore what you bought that day. They know when your credit card was used and when you spent money at a Woolworths supermarket and at Woolworths fuel, and then they're merging that with insurance profiles. And that's pretty big brother. And I'm not advocating we go that far, but I guess what I'm talking about is when you actually start to layer data sets up, you can get some incredible insights into these things. That's a bit creepy, but you can get some pretty incredible data sets when you actually start doing that. And this is kind of the same thing, and this is where the future's going to get to based on, if I was at the shop and I just bought myself a tub of ice cream, and then when I hop on Google, because Google will know because it's hooked up to my credit card and my spending data, all of a sudden Netflix will pop up and say, hey, do you want to rent a movie to go and watch with a tub of ice cream? And everyone laughs, but we're actually probably not far off that. You know. And I've used this example before at a hotel room here today. But that's real stuff. So, this is what I come down to. As a profession, we have to get better at quantifying the benefit that we do from what we do. Otherwise, we're not going to be left behind, but it just makes it'll make our job much easier to sell. Why we need to do city building things, why we need to spend money on main streets and upgrades and parks, and the benefit of these so-called nice green fluffy things that exist around our cities, but show that green space and parks can have a tangible benefit for our cities. So to wrap up, big data is real. Get on board. You can't get out of the way of this thing. There's going to be a juggling. I think the expression that Stefan Hakowicz, who's the head researcher at the CSRI report, is that big data is a little bit like the tide. You know, you can't go against the flow. All you need to do is get in the flow, do the best you can to go with it. We cannot swim against the tide of this big data. So as planners and towns, I think we need to be looking for these wider economic and stimulatory effects and try and measure them. I think if we can try and quantify these things, and as a profession, we're going to be much better off. Mobile phone data, I actually think, is going to be the way of the future for our profession to understand the way our cities and people actually work. And I think we need to somehow figure out how we talk with the mobile phone companies about getting that data and making sense. Because one thing I can tell you when working with the phone companies is they know they've got an incredible data set. They do not know what to do with it when it comes to cities. They just know they've got something. We know that we have a problem. They know they've got a solution. We need to come together. Credit card and FPOS terminal expenditure, I actually think is the only real way to measure, post spending changes after a planning intervention. And it does come at a cost. There's no doubt about that. But I would argue that buying this data, I would consider just the cost of doing good business in a city. We're prepared to keep funding traffic models that model traffic across our cities, and we just fund these traffic models, yet we're not prepared to buy data that helps us understand how people are working in our cities. I just think we need a mental shift in the money we're prepared to spend on understanding how our cities work. And the Internet of Everything is going to change the way our cities work. I think it's pretty scary having toilets are going to assess how healthy you are, but nonetheless, according to Dr. Suda, that's the case. But I think we need to get on board and understand the opportunities. And my little Abraham quote over there, which I'll leave you to read, but this is kind of how I feel. Like I think, as a profession, we need to create the future ourselves. We need to be willing to get on board. Our profession is deeply rooted in tradition and written language and doing things but old-fashioned, longhand, but we need to get on board, because otherwise we get that.